The reason I dedicate an entire lesson to the opening lead, because strictly speaking, there's 13 tricks, and I'm talking about not only the first trick, I'm talking about the first card of the first trick. So I'm talking about a quarter of a 13th of the game, i.e. less than 2% of the game. Or is it 52nd? Anyway, 1 over 52 of the game. So it's not a very relevant card, you could argue, because there are 51 other cards to go. The problem with an opening lead, and the reason why it's sort of enigmatic, is that you don't get to see the dummy. So in mini bridge, you have an easy life. You look at the dummy and you go, dummy's got no good diamonds, I'm going to lead a diamond. In real bridge, you lead the opening lead, you face it on the table, then the dummy goes down, and then you go, I wish I'd not led that, and it's too late. And you'll have all experienced that. I'm going to lead this because I think this is a good idea. You see the dummy and you go, oh, that was a bad idea. But it's too late because you've led your card. So the opening lead is the only card you have to play where you can't see the dummy. So you're essentially blind because you don't get anywhere near as much information because you can only see your 13 cards and you can't see the other 13, which gives you a much bigger chunk of the picture of what's going on in the hand. So the first card the defender plays, the person on the opening lead, is renowned as the most difficult card to play in the entire game of bridge. It's very difficult because you are clueless as to what's going on. The only information you've got is the cards you can see in your hand, which is what you always have, and their bidding. They must have bid because you're a defender. So you have some fragments of information with regards to what they bid, what their shape is, how many points they have, blah, blah, blah. The better defender, or rather a good defender, will use the information they've learnt in the bidding to guide their defence. So if the declarer was bidding hearts like a lunatic, you will know that they have lots of hearts, which means they don't have lots of whatevers, and you start to piece together what kind of hand the declarer has. Being a good defender is all about working out what declarer's up to. If declarer is drawing the trumps, why are they doing that? If declarer isn't playing diamonds, why are they avoiding diamonds? And you start to piece together through inference what's going on. The difficulty of the opening lead, as I say, is you can't see the dummy, so you don't know what's going on. So your first card is a very difficult card to play. Not only that, it often is the make or break of the contract. You can actually hear, really, really good players will say, they led a diamond, so that's why they made 3 no trumps. If they'd led a spade, they wouldn't have made 3 no trumps. That happens all the time. And it's a horrible seat to be in. I hate being on opening lead, because you can go, I could lead this, or I could lead that. And after the hand, you go, did the wrong one. Because you will find it makes a big impact, because often as a defender, you get, let's say, 2 or 3 opportunities to decide what you're leading. One of those opportunities is when you can't see the dummy, which is really annoying. Because what you'd like to do is have a quick peek of their hand and then go, club lead. But you can't do that. So what you find is it's a very critical card, and it's the time you have least information, which is really annoying. So what a lot of there's loads of books written about it and everything, the opening lead is a really difficult kind of subject to cover, which is why I dedicate a lesson to it. So what I've kind of devised is there are good leads, bad leads, and leads that are kind of neutral-ish. I don't mind them, I wouldn't be ecstatic with leading them, nor am I upset by leading them. What I tend to do, from my personal stance, is I look at suits I do not want to lead. So I try and eliminate bad leads, and then see if I have any good leads. That's my process, but you could go the other way. You could go, have I got any good leads? No. Have I got any neutral leads? No. Throw your hand away kind of time. You tend to find you could almost always, there are specific hands where it won't happen, almost always lead from one of these 2 columns, the green column being good or the black column being not bad. The red column is something you really want to try to avoid at all costs if you can avoid it. There are hands you could create where you can only find one of these leads, but they are exceptionally rare. Okay. Now I've split them into 2 halves-ish halves. This is against trumps, and this is against no trumps. They need to be split because leading against trumps and no trumps, they are different creatures. No trumps plays differently to trumps, as we've all experienced, and therefore the opening lead varies. What are good leads against no trumps are not necessarily good leads against trumps, for example. Now, things to note. I'm going to try and cover each of these, but I'm not going to spend too long on the ones that I hope, are straightforward. But the main things to note, the differences to note between the trumps and the no trumps, is the kind of the best lead in the book. You'll have heard me say this when I touched on defence, months ago now. When we have top of touching cards, so you'll have heard me say this several times, when you have touching cards as a defender, king, queen, jack, 10, that kind of stuff, a little run if you like. When you have touching cards, it's a really good lead because it promotes tricks in your hand without giving anything away. When you lead the king, promising the queen, it gets rid of their ace and gives you a trick in the shape of the queen. Whereas if you led the king and you didn't have the queen, it's likely they'll ace your king and you've achieved nothing with that card. So sequential cards, and the better and better your sequence, the more attractive it is. That really is basically your favourite lead whenever you can. If you have a sequence, that is almost always the best lead to make, because it both promotes tricks and doesn't give anything away. It's a positive for you and no positive for the declarer. There's no real risks attached. Notice here, top of touching 2 against trumps, queen, jack, you lead the queen, jack 10, you lead the jack. 6, 7, I don't really care if it's a sequence that low, because that's unlikely to do anything. For me, a sequence, anything including a 10 or higher, I would consider a decent sequence. So 10, 9, yes, it's a sequence. No, I'm not ecstatic, but it's a sequence. The better and better on a sequence you get, the more and more attractive it is, until you get right up to the glory days of ace from ace king. Ace from ace king is basically the best lead. And the reason for that is you don't give anything away, you win a trick, and you get to see the dummy, assuming they don't trump it, which will be rather unlucky. You lead the ace, you get to see the dummy, and now you can formulate your plan, and you would have not got the disadvantage of not seeing the dummy. So ace from ace king is a really attractive lead.
What is in there?
Ace from ace king. When you've got ace king together.
Oh, right, yeah.
You always lead top. So if you lead the ace, you're promising the king.
Yeah.
Now, when you first start playing bridge, your instinct is to snatch tricks. It feels like a sprint of a game, and it is in fact a marathon of a game. So when you lead the ace, you must have the king. If you lead the ace without the king, it is a bad lead. Notice, honour without a sequence. So if you lead an ace, that promises the king. It's not on a Tuesday when the weather's nice, it has the king. You have the king. Okay, you don't break that rule. So you lead the ace, you promise the king. If you don't have the king, but you do have the ace, you do not lead that suit because you don't have the sequence required. Okay, so when you lead the ace from ace king, your partner can rely on you to have the king. It's good because you see the dummy, and it doesn't really cost you anything in the sense that you've grabbed a trick.
But when you've got king queen,
lead the king.
Right.
You might not retain the lead, and in fact it's quite likely you won't retain the lead, but it's still a good lead. It's not as good as ace king, obviously, but it's still good. And when you get down to sort of jack from jack 10, it's still a good lead, but obviously not as good as the high numbers. But when you first get into defence, you think, I'll grab this trick, I'll grab that trick, and what you're actually doing is establishing tricks for the declarer. You lead your ace on fresh air, ace from ace 6, 4, 2, thinking, I've won a trick, go me. Well, firstly, everyone would have won that trick. That's not good bridge to play an ace and win it. Everyone can do that. But your ace should have killed something. So by playing the ace, they will make their king and queen separately, and you've actually cost yourself tricks. You've got one in the short term, but you've lost them in the long term, if you see what I mean. So that's why sequences are so good, because they essentially establish tricks, a long-term plan. Okay? Notice, in the no trumps, top of touching cards, that's a more vague sentence, isn't it? That's not because I couldn't remember the saying from up there. It's because when you lead top of touching cards against no trumps, you would ideally like a sequence of 3. The reason for that is it's more likely that suit will play out to its full length. When you lead a suit against trumps, often you will have 2, every now and again 3, but almost always 2 rounds or fewer of that suit before someone's trumping it. Whereas against no trumps, it's quite likely you can play 3 or even 4 rounds of that suit, because whoever's ran out can't trump it. So when you're leaning against no trumps and you have a sequence, you tend to want a better sequence, because that suit is likely to play out longer. It's more likely to carry on, if you will. So what you would like is 3 touching cards: king from king, queen, jack, ace from ace, king, queen, queen from queen, jack, 10. But occasionally you will have 3 honours, and they don't quite run as nicely as I've just said. Ace from ace, king, jack, king from king, queen, 10. That's close, isn't it? That's what's known as a broken sequence, where you've got honour, honour, miss, honour. I think it's still worthwhile leading top of touching, as long as you've got 3 honours in the suit. As long as 2 of them are touching somewhere, it's worth leading them. So king from king, queen, 10 is a relatively good idea, because you've got 3 honours. King from king, queen, 9 is starting to get a bit dodgy. That's arguable. King from king, queen, jack is standout. You absolutely should lead king from king, queen, jack. So you need a slightly better sequence. Now I'm nitpicking here. This is min-maxing. This is going 95% to 100%. But it is worth noting, because against no trumps, you tend to find if you lead just top of touching 2, suddenly that honour being killed by one of the baddies' honour, you sort of lose control of the suit. That's not relevant in trumps because they start getting trumped, but in no trumps they won't. So you want a better sequence slightly. So against no trumps, if you have the suit of king, queen, 4, 3, you shouldn't lead the king because you haven't got 3 honours. Against trumps, you should lead the king. So you see how that's a minor difference that actually changes what you lead. It's all about short term versus long term. No trumps is a longer game, if you will. Obviously, it's not more than 13 tricks, but it's more of a drawn out affair, whereas trumps tends to be people trumping quickly, so you need to try and grab more readily. Okay? So, top of a sequence, best lead by a mile. If you have got a sequence, it tends to be the best lead. Obviously, you could create a hand where you need to not lead your sequence, but almost always sequences tend to work well or not cost you anything. Against trumps, singleton. Now, singleton, as you probably could guess, and I will have mentioned it before, is a card with one card, a one-carded suit, if you will. The reason leading a singleton against trumps is good is because it gives you a void. If you lead that suit and you've run out, that's good as long as someone else leads them again whilst you've still got trumps in your hand. Now, that is a big if. That's a conditional. But by leading a singleton, I mean, the dream scenario is your partner has the ace, and then they return that suit, and you trump it, and then smile at declarer because they didn't make their king. But more often than not, the declarer will have the good cards in that suit, and you're crossing your fingers that your partner will remember the suit you've led, so that then they get in and lead it you back. But that doesn't always happen. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But a singleton is a good lead against trumps, because it voids yourself of a suit, and being void in trumps is a good thing. Being void in no trumps is not a good thing. So leading a singleton, you will notice, doesn't appear in the no trump bit. There is some mention of it somewhere here, short suits, wherever, short suit there. Short suits against no trumps are not good leads, because being void is not a good thing, because they keep playing that suit and you can't trump it. So actually short suits are avoidable. So they're kind of opposite with regards to trumps, no trumps. Low from an honour. So when I briefly touched on the defence, it was top of a sequence, king, queen, or queen, jack. If you haven't got a sequence, you lead a low card. That's essentially all I said. I kind of really condensed it down. Leading a low card away from an honour is a reasonable bet, and that's because essentially what you're trying to do is build tricks in the long run. So you're hoping your partner has something in that suit, and together you can make some tricks in that suit. You lead low away from your queen, hoping your partner has the king, which gets rid of their ace, and your queen's a winner.
So basically what you're saying is you've got an honour and you've got a low card.
Yeah.
So you play the low one.
Yeah. So you have something like king 6 4 2, you play the 2. Now leading low from an honour is not as good as leading a sequence because you are now attracting some risk. The risk is you lead the 2, it goes 2 7, and your partner has a zip in the suit and plays the 6, and the declarer goes, oh, I'll win the 7, thank you. That does happen sometimes, which is why sequences are better. But by leading a low card, what you're trying to do is build tricks together. It tends to be a decent lead, leading low away from an honour. Notice in the brackets I put not ace. This is a specific case against trumps. When you lead a low card promising an honour, jack, 10, jack or above, that kind of region, leading low against trumps, the danger of what's known as under-leading an ace. Whenever you lead a card underneath an honour you have, it's known as under-leading. If you lead away from an ace, the risk is the declarer makes the king, they draw the trumps, and then they never play that suit again, and you just cry having not made your ace. So a suit that has an ace and nothing else, or an ace and not the king, you want to try and avoid leading if you can. Under-leading an ace against trumps is actually bad. And the reason for that, as I say, the declarer might make it's almost always the declarer has the king whenever you do it for some reason. And then they just don't play that suit anymore. And you might never make that ace. So under-leading an ace is one of the kind of crimes of being on lead. Only ever against trumps. Under-leading an ace against no trumps is okay. And the reason for that is that the suit will be played again and they can't trump it. So it's all about the quick or long kind of game. Under-leading an ace against no trumps is okay because you are quite likely to be able to play that suit again. Someone, somewhere. Hopefully you or your partner. Whereas under-leading an ace against trumps is risky. There is in fact 2 standout bad leads, and that is leading low from an ace and leading the ace without the king. They are 2 real big no-nos when you're on lead. And they are so bad, Leeds Bridge Club introduced a little fine box. And every time anyone makes one of those leads, they put £1 in the box. And it's a way to incentivise their players of stopping doing those leads. So I appreciate I'm kind of hammering this point home. But if you're to get anything from all that load of information, is don't lead an ace without the king and don't under-lead an ace against trumps. Okay?
Under-leading an ace explain that under-lead.
Leading a card when you have a higher card than it. So under-leading an ace would be ace 7 4 3, and you lead the 3.
And you're not supposed to do that.
Not against trumps, no.
That's against trumps.
Against no trumps, that's okay, because your ace will make at some stage, you hope, unless they've got
Yeah.
13 tricks, which is unlikely. Whereas underleading against trumps, they suddenly might run out of that suit.
So in that case, let's just say you had got ace 4-3.
Yeah.
You'd play the ace.
No.
No,
You don't play it.
Yeah. The clue is leading. If you're deciding to lead against trumps and your suit is ace 7-4-3, let's say, you aren't leading that suit.
You don't lead it.
Just don't touch it.
Yeah.
You lead something else and hope that someone plays one of them to you, and then you clobber their king with your ace.
Right.
That's the key. The real key there is aces are made to kill kings if we can at all do so. Obviously, you kill a queen if you can, that kind of jealous. But by underleading it, you are never going to play that ace in that trick because you've gone first. So it's often a very risky thing to do. Okay? Right, now, they're the good leads basically. Low from an honour, shortage if you're against trumps, top of sequences. Top of a slightly better sequence against no trumps. Fourth down, basically low from an honour, same thing when you don't have a sequence. Partners bid suit. So whenever your partner bids a suit, they're suggesting they like that suit. So depending on how much you trust your partner, you should lead their suit. If you've seen their overcalls before and you've seen that they're dodgy, they overcall on 6 to the 10 or something, then take a pinch of salt. Typically speaking, when your partner bids, they have decent cards in that suit, which is why as an overcaller, you really should have decent cards in your suit. You're attracting that lead from your partner. One of the best situations to be in is when you're on opening lead and you're going, oh no, I'm on opening lead, I hate it. I still hate being on opening lead, by the way. You sort of get like PTSD about that time you led the wrong card and blah, blah, blah. When your partner's bid, you're almost off the hook, because if you lead that suit and it's wrong, it's their fault. If you lead that suit and it's right, you've done something good. So you sort of can't go wrong. So when your partner's bid a suit, often it's a good idea to lead that suit, especially against no trumps. And that's because they are suggesting they have length in that suit. And no trumps is all about setting up length tricks, establishing tricks. So by leading your partner's suit, you are doing them a favour. You're trying to establish their suit for them.
So
if
why
you
would you do that in trumps?
You would do that in trumps, I just couldn't fit it up there.
Okay.
But it's slightly less good in trumps, because often if your partner's bid them, it means the declarer is short in that suit. So therefore it's slightly less attractive. But it is still a good idea. If you have sequences in your partner's suit, you follow the normal rule. If you have a low card promising an honour, you follow the normal rule. So small promises an honour and king promises the queen. It's the same thing, you just happen to be choosing their suit because they asked you to, essentially. Okay. Leading partner suit is a good thing, as I say. It cheers them up, if nothing else. All right? Right, now the neutral leads. I'm not going to go into these too much.
Just
Yes?
explain that fourth down, the longest and strongest.
Yeah, so this is it's essentially the same as low from an honour. The reason I put that fourth down from longest and strongest is one of the most well-known phrases in bridge. People tend to hear it before they even start playing bridge. There is a reason why you choose the fourth down rather than the fifth down or the sixth down or whatever. It's something known as rule of 11, which I'll get to. But essentially low from an honour. I wouldn't focus on it too much. It's essentially the same thing as this. The only difference is you can lead away from an ace. That's the only difference. You lead your longest suit because you don't know what else to lead, essentially. And you have
But you
a lot of
can do
sequence.
that even if you've got an ace and no trump.
In no trumps, yes.
Yeah.
But in trumps, no. So it depends. It's all about what your plan is, really.
If your singleton is an honour,
Mm.
your partner will be expecting you to
Mm.
follow it.
Mm-hmm. Fair comment. If you lead a singleton honour, what you tend to find is most of the time they wonder why you've told a lie. So you lead the queen, and then the jack appears on the dummy, and they look at you and go, "You forgot how to play?" And then they work out that you've got a singleton. Almost always, when you lead an honour and it's a fib, it can be worked out by your partner. So it is still a good idea to lead a singleton. In fact, it's more obvious. If you led a singleton jack and the 10 is in their hand, they know you've told a fib. So then they must think, well, what else are you doing? Are you just breaking the rules because you like to do that, or are you doing something special? But yeah, singleton honour is telling a fib, yes.
And what about a singleton ace? Would you ever do that?
No,
No.
I wouldn't lead a singleton ace. It's one of the trap leads. People think leading a singleton ace is good because you lead your ace, you're now void of the suit, and then you can trump that suit. The problem is you play the ace and it goes 2, 3, 7. And you're essentially wasting your ace. So even then I'd sit back. Of course, you lead your ace, you get your partner in, they lead it back, you trump, you get them in, they lead it out, works, but it tends not to be good in the long run.
So really, the only time you lead with an ace is if you've got
The king.
touching.
The king.
Yeah.
Just, sorry, to go back to singleton and low from honour
Mhm.
on the trumps, how does the partner know which?
They have no idea.
No.
They have to work it out.
Okay.
You lead the 3 of diamonds, is that low from an honour or is that your only one? They have no idea. They just have to work it out. They see 5 diamonds in the dummy, they see 5 in their hand and they sort of go, you're probably short of them. that kind of thing. But it is guesswork. You do have to be a bit like an inspector to work out what's going on.
Why not leave the fifth down for the longest and strongest?
You might not have a 5-card suit.
Yes.
So if you did, you then have an option. There is something known as third and fifth leads, but I'll not get into it. But essentially, the reason it's fourth down is because you are forced into having a four-card suit. You can't not. So that's the reason the saying is lead you fourth down, because you have to have a four-card suit somewhere. So whereas lead your fifth down, then you'd go, I haven't got a 5-card suit, and you start panicking.
But if you had 5, you could leave with it.
It's stylistic, your choice. Then.
Yeah.
Your choice. Yeah, you could.
Sorry, what about Doubleton's low?
I'm getting to the end.
Oh.
Yeah. You have a question?
I said, why didn't you just say bottom then?
There's a reason why it's fourth card down, which is something known as rule of 11, which I'll get to down the line. There's something you can work out from your partner leading their fourth down, because it means they have exactly 3
If you
cards
can
higher.
remember.
Yeah, of course. Well, that's this game in a nutshell, isn't it? Right, okay, now neutral leads. Neutral leads, you'll see I'll put this acronym on here, MUD. That stands for middle, up, down. So what that means is 3 cards that are not of interest. So 3 cards where you do not possess an honour being 10 or higher. So something like 9, 6, 4. So when you have a 3-card suit that is not of interest, the reason this is a neutral lead is because it's not particularly attractive, nor is it particularly costly. It's just kind of, it's my turn to play kind of card. The reason you lead middle, up, down, so with the 9, 6, 4, you would lead the 6, then follow it with the 9 on the next round, and then play the 4 on the third round. Obviously that isn't necessarily trick 1, 2 and 3, that might be trick 1, 7 and 10, so you've got to remember. You go middle, up, down, because if you go top down, that looks like top of a doubleton, which I'll talk about in a minute. And if you go bottom up, that looks like you have an honour. So if you lead the 4 and then the 6, your partner starts thinking you have the queen or the king or something like that. So with a 3-card suit of disinterest, you go middle, up, down. That is a neutral lead because it's just kind of, I don't know what to do, so I'm just doing this. You tend to find you lead it's something around the 5, 6, 7 region, and then you follow it with something like this 8, 9, 10-ish, that kind of region. Well, the 10 would be an honour. And then you have like the 2 or 3. It tends to be something in that region. Of course, it could be 2, 3, 4. And you lead the 3 and your partner thinks you've got an honour, and then you follow it with the 4 and then go, that could happen. Not particularly attractive, something to do to avoid a bad lead, really. I haven't got a good lead, so I'm doing this to avoid leading away from my ace, for example. Okay. Top of a doubleton, I alluded to that just now. That is when you've got 2 cards, a doubleton, 2 cards. And you go top down, so you have the 9 and the 2. You lead the 9, follow with the 2. Your partner should know you have only a 2-card suit. When you lead the 9, they could think, is that a singleton or is that a doubleton? And they don't know. You know, but they don't. So you kind of just have to follow it through. Whenever they lead a high card, something like 7, 8, 9, that kind of region, it's either a mud or a doubleton or a singleton. It never is an honour. Well, no, it's all right. You can draw it from inference.
I know exactly how you feel.
It is clear as mud, yeah, it is. Leading a trump. Now, leading a trump against a trump contract is somewhat of an enigma. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, so I've kind of put it in the middle column, but you could argue it goes like that. It all depends on whether the declarer is going to draw the trumps or not, and you don't know because you can't see the dummy. So you see the dummy and you go, I wish I'd led a trump, because they're going to use that void and trump over there and trump over there and trump and blah, 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 blah. So you might think, I wish I'd led a trump. Sometimes they want to draw trumps, you lead a trump and you're actually helping them. So leading a trump is an unusual thing because typically they have good cards in trumps. So leading a trump is something that can be good, it can be bad. It depends on what declarer's plan is, and you don't really know declarer's plan until you see the dummy, and we can't see the dummy.
I don't understand. Wouldn't you save your trump?
It all depends on what
case.
declarer's plan is. If declarer's plan is to trump in the dummy, you want to lead trumps to cut down the trumps.
How do you know?
You don't know. That's why I'm saying it's sometimes good, sometimes bad. If you want a little clue, this is going into a separate lesson. Leading a trump is good when they agree trumps late. There's a little saying actually. When the opponents, how's it go? When the opponents agree trumps late, often a trump lead is great. That's the saying. And the reason for that is when they go 1 club, 1 diamond, 1 heart, 2 hearts, they've agreed their secondary suit. That means they're short in diamonds and they're short in clubs, so they're going to go rough. That's what it tends to lend itself to. But leading a trump is something that
So if you
players
take their trumps, they can't.
exactly. You're taking 2 for 1 every time you lead one.
Yeah.
But you're guessing because you don't know them. They might draw the trumps off you and then play their lovely winning diamond suit.
Yeah.
So you don't know what their plan is. You will tend to find you kind of lead, let's say, top of a sequence, then you look at the dummy and go, wish I'd led a trump. And then you try to lead trumps as much as you can. or vice versa, depends on what's happening in the hand. This one, I will kind of want to bracket it off because it's really kind of tricky to know when to do. But I'll do a separate lesson on that. But it's worth noting, you can lead a trump if you want to. I've put in here no honours. Don't lead away from honours in trumps. That's bad. When you lead a small card away from the king of trumps, you tend to find the declarer knows where everything is now, because they tend to have good cards in trumps. So it's very risky. Like a low card away from the queen of trumps, you'll find you don't make the queen of trumps anymore. You might have if they finessed. They won't finesse anymore because they know you've got it. You see what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So try to avoid leading trumps when you have honours.
John, your grand said, I think, don't lead a trump if you've only got a singleton. And I
Yes,
don't
that's a good
understand
point.
that.
I probably should put that here actually. Yes, that's something I've forgotten.
And I didn't understand why. She can explain.
Okay. Those of you who took photos, you're going to want to take another one, aren't you, in a minute? Leading a singleton trump is bad because your partner rates to have length. So when the opponents agree trumps, they have sort of 8 or 9 of them. And when you have 1, that means your partner has sort of 3 or 4. And what you tend to find is they have 3 or 4 with some kind of precarious holding, like Queen 9, 7, 2 or something like that. And by you leading a trump, you're actually finessing them for the declarer. So when you're short in trumps, your partner is long in trumps, which means they don't want a trump led to them because they've got a choice of how to play that suit. Whereas if you just stay away from them, the declarer doesn't know of the bad break.
Yeah.
They play the trumps themselves, find out the bad break too late. That's the theory. Okay. Now, one thing to note on the no trumps is an unbid suit I put here as a neutral lead. When the baddies don't bid a suit, think of 1 club, 1 heart, 1 spade, 3 no trumps. No one's bid clubs. Which one did they miss? Diamonds. Whichever one they missed, I can't remember. When they've not bid a suit, they tend not to have length in that suit, naturally. When they bid clubs, diamonds and spades or whatever, they tend not to have many hearts, because why didn't they bid them? So if you don't have hearts yourself, there's only one player left who might have hearts. If it ain't them and it ain't you, it's your teammate. So by leading an unbid suit, what you're trying to do is establish your partner's suit. By leading your partner's suit, this is when your partner has named a suit. Leading an unbid suit is kind of hoping they have that suit. So that's when they haven't particularly bid a suit, but you don't have one of these. So I haven't got a sequence, I haven't got a 4-card suit because they've already bid my whatever. Leading an unbid suit is something that's neutral in the sense that you're hoping for your partner to have something in that suit. But it's not necessarily good because they might not. Do you see what I mean? Mm-hmm. So leading an unbid suit against no trumps tends to be a reasonable thing. You can lead an unbid suit against trumps, but as I say, you tend to find that suit doesn't get played out very much before someone is trumping. Of course your partner could be trumping it, but that would be lucky. Leading a length suit, hoping your partner has length in a particular suit, is kind of neutralish. We don't really know. But if you don't have any of these, then these are better. You can do middle up down against no trumps as well, if you don't have one of these. It's a bit like a flowchart. Can I do this? No. Can I do this? No. Uh-oh. So middle up down, basically, you lead the middle one, then go up, then go down, because if you do it in any other order, it suggests something else, low from an honour or top of a double. If you do it in any other, you can't do it. You have to go middle up down. You have to tell the truth. So the reason I start on this side of the board is because if there is any information not going in, it's this information I want to go in, because this is the thing I want you to be attracted to, hence the pretty green colour. This bit's kind of this bit. If you like, you can forget it, but what I would like is for you to, in a sense, remember what not to do, if you know what I mean. So the red stuff is essentially doing one of these things and telling lies. Leading an honour without touching honour, so leading the king without the queen, bad lead. Leading the ace without the king, bad lead. Leading away from an ace against trumps, bad lead. They're just all things that are breaking something over here, okay? They're breaking convention. Leading a low card, suggesting you have an honour, when you don't have an honour, bad lead. It's essentially telling fibs to your partner is not good, and that's probably not surprising. The only things to note are leading a trump honour. You don't want to lead sequences in trumps. So if you have queen, jack, little in trumps, you could argue, top of touching 2. Problem is, the trump suit is the one that the declarer is interested in, not your partner. So therefore, try to avoid trump honours if you can. I mean, again, it might be your only lead that isn't terrible, but typically speaking, when you've got like king, queen, x, you just sit on the trumps because you might make both of them, because the declarer is looking for them, not your partner. A singleton trump, we mentioned that earlier. If you have a singleton trump and your partner has length, they don't want you to lead one. So that's a different one. Now against no trumps, it's slightly different. You normally lead your length suit against no trumps. So normally you have your 5-card diamond suit, 3 clubs, 3 spades, 2 hearts, let's say. Normally you're leading your long suit because that's what you're trying to do. Unless your partner's bid or unless you've got a really good sequence, you're leading a small card from your long suit. Now what you will find is that the baddies have bid something along the way to their no trump contract, unless I suppose if they open one no trump. They tend to find that they go 1 diamond, 1 heart, 1 no trump, 3 no trumps kind of jazz. It's often bad leading into declarer's suit. So if declarer has opened diamonds and then bid no trumps and then ended up in 3 no trumps, let's say, leading into their suit is often bad because they have length in that suit as well. So a bad lead is leading into declarer's bid suits. And the reason for that is they tend to have like ace queen or king jack 10, and by them playing last on that trick, they get an advantage. So if your suit, your length suit, happens to be one of their length suits, you try to avoid it if you can. And that's where you might do this, an unbid suit, in preference to doing your length suit. Do you see how it kind of filters out? I want to lead my I want to lead my diamond from my jack to 5 diamonds, and then you look and go, but they've bid diamonds. So that's probably not a good idea. Instead, I will lead this 3-card club suit because I don't know what else to do. And then you hope for your partner to have something good. What you tend to find is if you have length with the declarer, your partner has absolutely no interest in that suit at all. So when you guys have got 10 cards in diamonds between you, your partner has kind of 1 or 2, and on your opening lead, they will produce something miserable like the 6. And then you go, probably shouldn't have led that. So leading into declarer is bad. Leading through the dummy is not as bad, because at least they have to play 2nd rather than 4th, which is slightly better. But even in that instance, leading dummy suit is probably worse than leading the unbid suit. Can't guarantee that, of course, because it could be that the dummy suit is 2, 3, 4, 6 or something. But typically speaking, if you can lead an unbid suit in preference to leading suits that have been bid by the baddies, that tends to be better. You might have to do middle up down if you only have a 3-card suit to lead. You might have to do top of a doubleton, but that's really practically not what you have to do. As I say, when against no trumps especially, if partners bid a suit, it gets you off the hook. Because you just lead that suit and then it either works or it doesn't, and it's on your partner's head, essentially. Okay, which is good in both aspects. Alright, so just to kind of do a 2-minute blitz recap. If you have sequences, lead top of touching cards. Top of touching 2 against trumps, top of touching 3 preferably against no trumps. If you don't have a sequence, you're leading a low card. The low card depends on whether you have an honour or not. If you lead low, that promises an honour. If you lead middly and then down, that's not an honour. If you have 2 cards in a suit, you go top down. If you have 3 cards in a suit, you go middle up down. Again, this is all setting you up for when you get really, really, really good at defence, you will start noticing these little different kind of tweaks, if you will, intricacies.
You said about if you've got a doubleton top down, what about low like high hate?
So I'm glad you mentioned that because I forgot to talk about that. When you lead a low card, there's a little saying which you just mentioned. Low like high hate is referring to the card you've actually led. So when you lead a low card, like a 3, that suggests you like the suit because it looks like you're doing this, low from low. If you lead a high card, something like the 7, that looks like you're doing one of these things, mud or top of a doubleton, which means high hate because hate's a very strong word, but it's because it begins with H that we use it. It'd be low like high dislike would be nice, wouldn't it? But it doesn't quite work. High hate suggests that you don't have an honour in that suit. So something like the 7 suggests you're going to follow it with a little one, showing a doubleton, or it might be a singleton, or it might be middle up down. It all depends on how the suit plays out after that.
What do you define as a low?
Good question. It's contextual, which is very helpful.
Because you said high is a 7, and to me that's not high.
High from the pip card, so I'm ignoring
Yeah,
10
yeah.
upwards.
Well,
10, Jack, Queen, King, Ace are all
That's
honours,
what I'm
so they're
saying.
all
So
honours.
generally you're looking between 5 and 10,
Yeah.
and 5 and 1.
2, 3, 4 are definitely
Well, not
low.
one, but 2.
2, 3, 4
to
are definitely
4.
low. 7, 8,
5
9 are
to-
definitely high. 5 and 6 are murky, to be honest with you. It's contextual, because if you have the 2, the 3 and the 4 in your hand and your partner leads the 5, that's low, isn't it?
Yeah.
If you've got 7, 8, 9 in your hand and your partner leads the 6, that's high, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, and what you can see in the dummy, you have to work it out, I'm afraid.
Yeah. No, I'm just generally
Yeah.
because when
Typically
you're saying
speaking,
high,
2, 3,
you
4
tend
is
to
low.
think of
I
picture
understand.
cards.
Yeah, I'm talking about
Honours.
2 through 9, really.
Yeah.
7, 8, 9 is high, 2, 3, 4 is low, 5, 6 is dodgy.
Yeah.
But again, they might lead the 6 and hope you know it's low. It all depends on what they've got in their suit. You could create a hand where you actually have to break one of these rules. You could, for 4 example, have 4 aces and no sequences, and you're leading against 4 spades. So you have to lead away from an ace. You could create that hand. That has actually happened to me. So in that instance, because we have to lead low from an ace, you've just got to do what you've got to do. But in that situation, really, you'd like to throw your cards up and demand a redeal. Okay?